I sit in my favorite armchair, the soft fabric worn from years of use, and watch as golden rays of the afternoon sun filter through the window. They dance across the worn wooden floor, illuminating memories that linger like warm whispers from the past. I can still hear the bright laughter of my son echoing through the hallways of our home. It feels like a lifetime ago, a time when I was everything to him. He was my little world, the centerpiece of my life. The scent of fresh cookies often filled our kitchen, the delightful aroma wafting through the air as I kneaded dough with my hands. I remember the sticky mess on his cheeks as he savored the chocolate chips, tiny fingers reaching for more, a sweet reminder of our shared joy. Those evenings spent baking together were moments I cherished deeply, heart swollen with love and pride. As I mixed flour and sugar, I replay moments in my mind. The day he took his first steps, wobbly and unsure, but nonetheless determined. I can still feel my excitement, a palpable warmth that flowed through me. Each milestone felt like a small victory, a testament to our bond, and as my heart swelled, I reveled in my role as his mother. In those days, my aspirations were laid aside, to skip promotions at work, forego new opportunities, and prioritizing his needs took precedence. My husband worked long hours, and I knew that nurturing my son meant I had to be the constant in his life. Together, we became the team that buoyed each other through life's challenges. His happiness filled our home, and my selflessness felt like a fulfillment, a vital part of my identity. Family trips to the park were grand adventures, each slide down the playground setting off a torrent of giggles. I can almost hear the rustling of leaves and feel the sun on our faces as we launched paper boats into the creek, hoping against hope that they would sail far. We were explorers, conquerors of tiny worlds, and I reveled in the proud moments, the happy tears at his school graduation when he turned to wave at me, his eyes sparkling with achievement. But as he grew, changes began to unfurl gently beneath the surface. Subtle indications of independence blooming like flowers, threatening to burst forth. With each stride toward adulthood, I sensed him pulling away, immersing himself in new relationships and exciting endeavors. That bittersweet tug on my heart told me I would need to let go, but the transition left echoes of uncertainty in its wake. I would watch as he navigated friendships and romances, feeling a strange mixture of pride and trepidation. Each day, he'd plunge deeper into this new world, and I remained a spectator, herding my personal dreams further into the corners of my heart. The moments that used to belong to only us began to slip through my fingers, and I often questioned if I had done enough to prepare him. As I reflect on those memories now, I can't help but feel a pang of nostalgia. There were hints of what was to come, a growing separation that I so desperately tried to ignore. Back then it was all about our connection, the pride I felt in every small victory, the love that filled our home like the aroma of my baking. But that bond, once so bright, has felt increasingly out of reach, like a mirage that evaporates as you approach it. Now, as I sit alone in my cherished chair, the echo of my son's laughter fades, replaced by a haunting silence. I trace the trajectory of those treasured years, oblivious to the storm that looms at the horizon of our lives. It is a silence filled with uncertainty, tainted by the shadows of what lies ahead, a presage of the upheaval and humiliation that is yet to unfold. The first time I met her, I noticed how she commanded the room, her laughter bright and clear, drawing everyone's attention like a moth to a flame. I was happy for my son, convinced that her vivaciousness would complement the quiet strength of his character. As they sat across from me at the dinner table, their gazes locked, I couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope, a promise of love and joy for the future. "Mom, this is Claire," he introduced her, his voice brimming with enthusiasm. I felt a swell of pride as I watched him navigate this milestone with the confidence that came from experience. But beneath the surface, a flicker of unease crept in. Claire was beautiful and self-assured, a dazzling star in the constellation of my son's life. But I couldn't ignore the small, troubling instinct that whispered cautions to my heart. At first, she seemed to embrace family traditions with warmth. I remember a Sunday dinner filled with the warmth of garlic bread and roasted chicken. I placed the food on the table with care, my heart full of hope that we could create new memories together. But as soon as I sat down, I sensed a shift in the atmosphere. "Your lasagna is so traditional," she remarked, her smile flickering for a brief moment. My heart sank. "My mom always says that food evolves, you know?" Her eyes darted to my son, seeking validation. I forced a smile, the tension in my chest tightening as I felt a coolness envelop the room, pushing out the warmth I so desperately sought. This was just the beginning. Over time, the subtle jabs became sharper, like arrows aimed at my heart. Each family gathering became a balancing act, where I was forced to tread carefully around Claire's pointed comments. She would comment on my home, the outdated decor that once felt cozy, but now felt like relics. "Have you thought about an open floor plan?" she'd ask, as if my at-home sanctuary was nothing but a cluttered mess. My son would chuckle, dismissing my feelings. I often caught him avoiding my eyes, lost in thought as if he were miles away, making the distance between us feel like a chasm. I fought against the swell of pain rising within me, yet I could feel every inch of that distance growing. I tried to embrace change and accept her place in our family, but it felt like I was being left behind in a whirlwind of cruelty, wrapped in a bow of kindness. It wasn't long before family dinners became an exercise in endurance. I watched as Claire took charge, steering conversations, claiming authority over our traditions like a captain charting a new course. My once vibrant kitchen, filled with love and laughter, began to feel foreign. Even the sound of cutlery clinking seemed to echo a sense of loss rather than joy. The moments I once cherished began to vanish behind a haze of confusion. My heart ached as I prepared recipes from my mother's kitchen, hoping that the flavors would weave us together. Instead, I watched Claire pick at her plate, feigning enthusiasm while dismissing the entrees I had poured my heart into. "Delicious, but a bit too rich," she would say, not realizing how each word felt like a small stab to my confidence. Amidst this shifting landscape, I found solace in the quiet. I sought sketchy corners of the house, hunched over tattered photo albums. Each image turned felt like a tether to reality, reminding me of the love that once defined our family. Yet, the smiling faces felt distant now, fragments of a time when I felt secure. The love I offered so openly now faced constraints, suspended in uncertainty. The first warning signs were often hidden behind innocent laughter, veiled in the popularity Claire commanded. I felt cast to the side like an old toy as she seamlessly transitioned into the leading role of the family drama. I had dedicated my entire being to my son, yet now I felt invisible, reliving my history as a spectator of my own life. And then, seemingly out of nowhere, I began to dread every family gathering. I would grip my glass of wine tightly, seconds ticking like hours, as I anticipated the next flying arrow from Claire's quiver. Deep within, I knew I needed to acknowledge my feelings and confront the shadow slowly creeping over my heart. A shadow that told me I'd let my motherly instincts dim, that I had to take a firm grasp of my presence and worth. But still, I couldn't bring myself to voice my discomfort. Claire encompassed everything: the joys of my son's new life, the chapters I had yet to explore. Each family gathering felt like a masquerade ball that was slowly suffocating the truth lurking beneath the surface of my heart, where my love for my son battled my growing resentment. I wished with each breath that the bond we shared could bloom once more, back to the laughter that rang through our home so brightly. But as I remained hoisted on the fence between acceptance and anger, the quiet corners of my heart began to tremble. I felt each moment passing, and a realization took root, a painful understanding that family dynamics were shifting in ways I simply couldn't ignore. In those moments, the shadows weren't just Claire's, they were my own, creeping closer as I sat silently, each remark twisting more tightly around my heart, a noose of pain, tightening slowly, threatening to choke the very love I had always offered so freely. I could see the distance growing between my son and me, yet I felt powerless to stop the unraveling that lay ahead. As summer faded into autumn, my growing discomfort shaped every family gathering into a test of endurance. I would spend days preparing for these moments, crafting meals filled with memories, hoping to reclaim the closeness I once shared with my son. Yet, in the chaos of laughter and conversation, my efforts felt like whispers drowned out by a roaring sea. Thanksgiving arrived with the familiar scent of turkey roasting in the oven, my signature stuffing prepared with love and care. I placed it delicately on the table, hoping to garner smiles from my family. When Claire arrived, however, her confidence was electric and commanding. She swept into the kitchen, barely sparing my dish a glance as she showcased her own culinary creation, a modern twist on sweet potato casserole. I watched in silence as my son praised her, the warmth of his affection for her piercing through me like shards of ice. "So creative, Claire," he chimed, while my heart sank. My once vibrant kitchen felt like a war zone where my contributions were mere afterthoughts, lost in the backdrop of her charm. As they convened around the table, Claire's laughter took center stage, bright but hollow. I clutched my glass of wine, feeling its presence as a lifeline, each sip dousing the embers of pride that flickered within me. I should have been among the joyous, but instead, I felt as if I was suffocating, an intruder in my own home. With each sarcastic quip, Claire wove a narrative that pushed me further into the shadows. "Mom, remember, food evolves," she commented lightheartedly after I served my stuffing. The reminder stung, yet I felt powerless to respond, suppressing the urge to defend my traditions. My son looked on, oblivious to my internal turmoil, lost in Claire's spell. Each subsequent gathering unfolded similarly. My heart clenched tighter, ensnared in a web woven by Claire's subtle jabs. I found myself withdrawing into a shell, navigating through the tension as a ghost haunting my own home. My efforts felt futile, a futile attempt to cling to a love that had begun to unravel under the weight of ridicule. Weeks morphed into months, and the once thrilling prospects of family dinners faded into dread. Claire's influence became a dark cloud looming over our events, snatching away my sense of belonging. Even my grandchildren, bright-eyed and playful, began to look to Claire for guidance over me, a widening gap that echoed my fears of becoming obsolete. The breaking point came during a Sunday brunch at Claire's. I found myself caught in a swirl of vibrant voices, laughter only amplifying my isolation. I stood in the kitchen, helping prepare dishes while Claire absorbed the spotlight. When I timidly offered my contribution, she dismissed it with an airy wave, her eyes glinting with an unspoken challenge. "Thanks, but I've got everything under control," she said, laughter bubbling in her tone as she turned back to the crowd. My heart dropped as I stood there, feeling the last threads of connection slipping away. In that moment, I knew the profound distance I had allowed to grow between my son and me, a chasm filled with unspoken words and untold truths. I retreated to the corner of the room, a shroud of muted colors enveloping me. Memories began to swirl like autumn leaves, once vibrant and now dulled by the chill of reality. My heart ached for the bond I had cherished and fought for, pleading silently for his acknowledgement. With each gathering, humiliation crept further into my life, a bitter taste that lingered long after the brunch had ended. I felt paralyzed between the love I had for my son and the resentment I nurtured toward Claire. The icebergs of emotion loomed larger, and I became painfully aware of how deeply I had been wounded, how quietly I had allowed myself to be overlooked. In the quiet corners of my mind, shadows of my own design emerged. The once empowered mother had become a lingering presence, lost and aching for rediscovery. I felt the unsettling tension rise, a reminder to reclaim my voice before Claire's relentless hold tightened around me. I was trapped in a gravitational pull, suspended between a beloved past and an uncertain future. Yet deep within me lay the urge to break free, to reclaim my place in this family, and to honor the love that still glimmered beneath the layers of pain. But I remained hesitant, fearful of the confrontation I knew awaited me, unsure whether the confrontation would lead to the freedom I sought or the final fracture of our fragile bond. The realization dawned that I could no longer remain silent. As the gatherings loomed on the horizon, I found myself standing at a crossroads, the need to assert my presence urgent and compelling. I would plan my next steps strategically, knowing I must step into the light before Claire's influence extinguished the last flicker of my once vibrant role. The sun dipped beneath the horizon, shadows stretching across my living room as I pondered the reality of my situation. I could no longer ignore the reality that surrounded me. I needed to understand Claire's full influence, her manipulative tactics that seeped like poison into my family. The silence I had harbored could no longer cage the truths I had brushed aside. With a determined heart, I began to observe, capturing the nuances of interactions that had once seemed innocent. Instead of gathering around the coffee table for heartfelt dinners, my son and daughter-in-law's lives revolved around shared activities, a whirlwind of brunches at hip restaurants, social media updates that painted an idealized picture of bliss. I felt like an outsider looking in, carefully cataloging moments where Claire's persona eclipsed my own. It was through casual conversations that the web of her influence began to weave a clearer picture. I found myself setting up small rendezvous with friends and family. Frances, an old neighbor and a keen observer of our interactions, became my confidant. With a warm cup of herbal tea in hand, she listened, her eyes narrowing in concern as I recounted my experiences over the last year. "It's like she's mapping the territory," Frances whispered one evening, sipping her tea. "You're being pushed away and she thrives on it." I nodded, feeling the weight of her words settle in my chest, rattling the chains that had bound me. I began to keep a journal, chronicling my emotions, the plaintive pangs of pain blending with observations. Each entry illuminated instances where Claire would interject with veiled insults wrapped in laughter, aiming for the soft spots in my heart where hope and pride remained. Even my son's reaction to her comments became crucial evidence. While he would chuckle agreeably, I noticed flinches, almost imperceptible signs that revealed his own inner turmoil simmering beneath the surface. Days turned into weeks, and my resolve to gather evidence deepened. I began tuning in to family group messages, capturing the tone of conversations, observing how my son responded with hesitance as Claire dominated discussions sent electric jolts through my system. Claire expressed her excitement about the trip to the coast. "It would be so fun to make new memories," he texted, and my heart sank. Where was my invitation to make those memories? The more I gathered these pieces, the clearer the landscape of our relationships became. I began to form connections between events that I had previously dismissed as mere flukes. I recalled family outings where Claire subtly shifted our direction. "Let's go here instead, it's more fun," as if orchestrating a play, with me forced into the role of the supporting actress. I watched the delicate manipulation unfold like a mesmerizing dance, a controlled performance that choreographed my invisibility while elevating Claire's presence. Little things began to haunt me. The way she always sat next to my son, the way their hands would touch, the way she would insert herself into conversations that once belonged to me. On one particular afternoon, as I rifled through old photographs to find something to anchor my resolve, I uncovered an old birthday card from my son. He had scribbled, "Mom, you're the best. Thank you for always being there." The words no longer held the brilliance they once had. Their promise felt tarnished, dimmed by the reality that had overtaken us. As tears blurred my vision, I recognized this would not be the end. I had to reclaim that bond. These revelations became my armor, each carefully collected moment fueling my determination to confront Claire. I would not let the poison seep any further into our family. I would gather my courage, slowly stitching together the pieces of evidence that not only illuminated my truth but also offered validation of the love I had always given so freely. Now armed with insights, it felt imperative that I delve deeper into Claire's past. I wanted to understand her motivations, the dynamics that shaped her interactions. Frances had mentioned a friend, Melissa, who could offer more insight, a lifeline to probe Claire's roots. "Melissa is a childhood friend. She may know things you'll find enlightening," Frances advised, her tone gentle yet urgent. After some hesitation, I reached out to Melissa, inviting her over for tea. As she settled into my cozy living room, I couldn't shake off the unease, the weight of what I was about to uncover looming heavily in the air. She spoke fondly of Claire at first, but as I prompted her with carefully directed questions, the shadows of Claire's darker tendencies began to reveal themselves. "I think Claire, she's always wanted to be the favorite." Melissa hesitated, choosing her words with caution. "She can be overwhelming when it comes to group dynamics. It's hard to fit into her vision, and if you don't see things her way, she'll make sure you notice." My heart raced. This was the evidence I sought, a reflection of the struggles I was enduring. It seemed Claire hadn't just come between my son and me, but rather sought to upend relationships in her bid for control, a resolute queen in a family chess game. Armed with this newfound information, I steeled myself for the upcoming family gathering. It was time to show up, to reclaim my voice in the light of gathered evidence. Claire could twist the narrative, but I now held the ink with which I would rewrite our story. As I turned to the mirror, I practiced my mantra. "They can mute me at the table, never in my heart." With resolve swelling in my chest, I promised myself I would stand firm on that foundation. I had gathered my truths. Now it was time to weave them together, confronting Claire with clarity I hadn't previously mustered. This was my family, too, and it was time for me to reclaim my rightful place. The day of the family gathering dawned bright yet heavy with expectation. I stood by the long dining table, heavy with the weight of my emotions, adorned with my finest serving dishes. The air was thick with the mingling aromas of the familiar recipes I had come to cherish, the rich smell of roasted chicken, the sweet tang of cranberry sauce. But this time I felt slightly detached. The house was filled with laughter, chirps of joy floating in and out, but I remained tethered to my thoughts, rallying my resolve. "Mom, you're all set. My son's cheerful voice echoed from the kitchen as he placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. His bright smile stirred warmth inside, a flicker of the bond I longed to reinforce. Yet just beneath that warmth lay a scar, reminding me of the distance Claire kept widening without remorse. As guests began to trickle in, I welcomed them with a beaming smile, my heart pounding to the rhythm of my mantra. They can mute me at the table, never in my heart. I repeated the words silently, anchoring myself against the tide of nervous energy. Claire arrived later, her presence strong and unapologetic. She stepped into the room like royalty, tipping the balance of the joyous gathering immediately. "Don't worry, I've brought a dessert that everyone will love," she declared, raising a beautifully packaged cake above her head as if presenting a trophy. My stomach churned with a mix of irritation and apprehension, but I swallowed it down, refusing to let her affect me before the battle commenced. As the gathering unfolded, laughter rang high, and I forced myself to join in. Yet, with every quip Claire made, I felt the cords of my frustration tightening, constraining my voice as if they were the very fabric of the moment. She shared stories that danced dangerously close to mockery, small jabs veiled in the guise of humor. Often, laughter followed, but I saw through it. I noted the discontent brewing beneath smiles, the way my son sometimes glanced at me, his expression swimming between loyalty and confusion. "I see you're still using the old recipes, huh, Mom?" Claire said, directing the conversation toward me amidst laughter over the main course. I felt exposed, scrutinized under the spotlight she had orchestrated. Innovation is key, right? Regaining composure, I met Claire's gaze head-on. This was my moment. "Tradition carries its own innovations," I replied coolly. A small hush fell over the room, the tension rippling through my heart like electricity, daring me to leap further. With blood roaring in my ears, I pressed on, noting the stunned silence. There's a warmth in food that memories bring. In that moment, I saw my son's eyebrows raise slightly, an acknowledgement that perhaps he was waking up to the truth everyone else had been dancing around. Claire's laughter faltered, and I pressed forward, refusing to retreat into silence. We bring our past to the table with every meal we share. My recipes tell our family story and bind us together. As the conversation danced tentatively around me, I felt emboldened. The bond I had cherished started to repair itself with every word I spoke. The resilience of my role as a mother surged within, coaxed back into the light from the shadows Claire had cast. After dinner, as guests flocked to the living room, I poured another glass of wine, feeling its comforting warmth course through. It made facing Claire seem just a bit easier. The conversation shifted toward the holidays, and everyone began exchanging plans and dreams in giddy excitement. "Claire, I assume you'll be holding the annual Christmas party again?" someone asked, her chain of influence evident. Claire nodded, her smile radiant. "Of course, it will be at our place again. Can't wait to show off the new decor and cuisine I've been planning." It was a subtle triggering of an old wound, one I thought had begun to heal. I took a deep breath, my hand lightly gripping the wineglass, and I decided it was now or never. "I'm looking forward to that," I interjected, allowing a confident strength to cloak my words. "But let's remember how last year was so eventful." A sudden hush fell. "Mom, what do you mean?" My son looked at me, unsure. Not backing down, I proceeded with clarity. "You know, the mix-up with the dish Claire served, which left half the guests confused about what the starters really were." I could feel Claire's gaze burning into me as she attempted to salvage her fading aesthetic. It's always good to keep family traditions in mind, especially when hosting. After all, memories bind us together. The room fell silent. The atmosphere shifted like a ripple across still water. I turned to the guests and saw their eyes glimmering with a mix of surprise and understanding. This was my family, and it was time they recognized the power of my voice. Food is more than just flavors. It's our history winding through every layer. There is beauty in remembering and cherishing these moments. Claire's inability to retort was shocking. I noticed her brow furrow in frustration, her grip tightening around her glass. But the very silence in her presence, now palpable, felt like a win, a significant alteration in the family dynamic. I could feel my son's gaze shift. This time, something was different. He appeared to consider my words, weighing them against the silence, his brow furrowed with concentration, gradually unraveling the tension between us. The evening rolled on, but I noticed that Claire's dominance had started to wane, allowing space for my presence to swell within the room. The camaraderie around my insides began building slowly. Conversations flowed effortlessly, and I watched as the guests leaned into the warmth of the truths I had shared. There was laughter, a genuine ring of appreciation for every moment spent together. As the night wound down and guests trickled out, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. I had confronted Claire not with venom but with purpose, reclaiming my place amidst the chaos she had conjured. In the dim light of the end-of-night festivities, I caught my son's eye, sensing an exhilarating shift, a blend of awareness and acknowledgement. "I'm glad you stood your ground, Mom." His voice was quiet, but it filled a chasm I thought would never be crossed. Relief surged through me, and in that moment, I felt the connection begin to blossom anew. The journey had begun, and there was still much that lay ahead. But for the first time in a long while, hope twinkled like a distant star, illuminating the path I would choose to reclaim my dignity and redefine the meaning of family, this time on my terms. In the days following the family gathering, I felt a spark of resolve ignite within me. The shift in attitudes had been subtle but profound. It was as if a light had flickered on in the room where darkness once suffocated my spirit. Confronting Claire had not only helped me reclaim my voice, but also provided an opportunity to establish meaningful boundaries. I needed to ensure that my place within this family wasn't just about enduring, but about embracing who I was. I watched the days fill with sunlight, but my mornings were devoted to reflection, where silence wrapped around me like a comforting blanket. I sipped my coffee, deep in thought, contemplating my previous approach. I knew I needed a strategy for our upcoming family barbecue, a casual gathering that presented the perfect stage to take a step forward. On the morning of the barbecue, I prepared my famous coleslaw, meticulously chopping vegetables as I visualized the event. Each slice felt like therapy, a part of my preparation to create something nourishing that could connect us. The cool crunch of the cabbage, the sweetness of the carrots, and the tanginess of the dressing mirrored the richness I wanted to infuse back into our family narrative. As I entered the backyard later that afternoon, the sun poured down and I felt its warmth wrap around me. This time I was not merely a participant, I was a player in my own family's story. My son greeted me with open arms, and the energy he carried bolstered my spirit. "Mom, you made it! Let's go eat!" He ushered me forward with enthusiasm. Surveying the gathering, I spotted Claire flitting from group to group, her laughter ringing out like chimes in the wind. More than ever, I felt resolved to not let her overshadow me with her manufactured charm. I hadn't come to compete with her. Instead, I had a plan to nurture the connections with family members who had felt forgotten in Claire's quest for attention. When it was time to serve food, I watched as Claire stepped into her self-appointed role as the star of the show. She poured herself into promoting her dishes, directing the very flow of dinner conversation. Rather than feeling daunted, I seized the moment. Instead of competing for the spotlight, I made it my mission to connect with those around me. I approached my sister as she tried a bit of my coleslaw. Her expression lit up. "This is amazing. What's your secret?" I felt a rush of excitement. Sharing my cooking felt liberating. Before I could reply, Claire interjected, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "Oh, is that another one of your specialties?" Eyes narrowing, I met her gaze and replied calmly. "Yes, it is. Food is our history, in a bowl, every bite a memory that brings us closer." A brief silence hung between us, charged and tense, a far cry from the next banter Claire expected. Returning to my sister, I elaborated on my recipe, noting how the crunch of the cabbage symbolizes resilience and how we all need a little zest in our lives, humor and warmth spilling over from the interaction. The crowd had gradually begun to gather, intrigued by a conversation that resonated with nostalgia. Moments turned into minutes, and the casual discussions began to weave together stories of shared meals, family gatherings, and the bonds that had built the family tapestry. Claire's ability to dominate the conversation started to wane as voices lifted in unison, celebrating our histories rather than competing for attention. As the day rolled on, I continued to foster this connection. I encouraged my cousins to share their own dishes and stories. The nostalgia flowed like the summer breeze, and what once felt like Claire's exclusive realm began to feel like a shared gathering place. I watched as her expression shifted from smug confidence to annoyance, a win for me in this quiet battle. Then came the pivotal moment of the night. As the sun dipped below the horizon, laughter transformed into heartfelt honesty around the fire pit. I noticed Claire glancing from person to person, desperately fishing for validation, but we were lost in our shared stories. I took the opportunity to gently reconnect with my dad, reminiscing about Grandma's baked beans, which sparked laughter and warmth. Claire took the chance to interject, "You know, I really thought we could elevate the barbecue this year with some new dishes." I caught her determined attempt to reclaim the spotlight, noticing how her words began to falter when I pulled everyone back to the family roots, reminding them, "But it's the memories of our traditions that bind us together. That's the flavor we shouldn't forget." As I spoke, I could sense my son looking to me with admiration, a subtle shift of recognition that perhaps my words were resonating. Claire, feeling cornered, attempted to retake control but faltered. It was all too evident that the crowd was moving with a new energy, embracing a collective reminiscing that included everyone. By the time the night drew close, I could feel a difference not just in myself but in my family. Connections that once felt thin had regained strength, built on acknowledgement and respect rather than competition and discontent. I embraced this awareness, a joyful realization that my voice mattered and could rise amongst the chorus, not in opposition, but in solidarity. As guests began to leave, I found my son once more. The sincere pride in his eyes washed over me. "You really did something special tonight, Mom," he said, as I could feel a deep pull of gratitude unfold. In that moment, I let my heart swell. "Thank you, sweetheart." It felt important to remind us all what foundation means in a family, how food and love aren't just ingredients, they're everything. Stepping back out into the cool evening breeze, my heart fluttered with excitement. I recited my mantra quietly. "They can mute me at the table, never in my heart." This declaration wasn't merely a reminder, it was a promise to myself. I felt anchored, firmly planted in the ground where my dignity thrived. I realized that in nurturing our family dynamics, I had not only found my voice but also an invitation for all of us to embrace the roots that had shaped us. This was just the beginning, and I would continue on this path, firmly reclaiming my rightful place in the tapestry of our family's love. In the days following the barbecue, a new wave of connection flowed through our family. I noticed how conversations shifted from Claire's reigning chaos to a sharing of warm memories that stitched us closer. My son frequently absorbed the discussions, nodding at stories echoing my sentiments, reinforcing the sense that my voice had been embraced. Then came the invitation for a family dinner, an opportunity layered with both excitement and trepidation. After weeks of renewed interactions, I felt both eager and apprehensive as I prepared my dish, a hearty lasagna steeped in history, reminiscent of my mother's love. Arriving at the dinner, the table brimmed with an abundance of color and laughter. Claire was in her element, her voice lively as she attempted to captivate everyone with her tales. But this evening I felt grounded. Instead of shrinking into the background, I felt a quiet confidence swell within me. I placed my lasagna on the table, creating a new focal point that disrupted Claire's efforts to monopolize the conversation. As I settled into my seat, Claire launched into another amusing anecdote. Yet, I sensed a subtle shift in energy and seized the moment. "Let's not forget what we truly celebrate here," I interjected, fixing my gaze on the table. "Our memories and traditions are the essence of our family." The words hung in the air, a delicate balance of hope and challenge. At first, Claire hesitated, the glimmer of uncertainty flickering across her face. The room echoed with my son's supportive nods, and I felt the voice of connection growing stronger. As I spoke of the lasagna's history, how the delicious layers represent our bonds, the conversation shifted. "What's your favorite family story?" I encouraged everyone, inviting voices and laughter to mingle. As my cousins began sharing their own warm memories, I reveled in the realization that the spotlight was shifting. Stories of our childhood cascaded across the table, unraveling the tight grip Claire had long held. But Claire wasn't going down easily. Each subtle attempt to steer the narrative back to herself was met with laughter and affection from the others, shuddering at the far edges of her overzealous grasp. I maintained the positivity, reinforcing the strength we found in each other. As laughter enveloped us, I caught sight of Claire's mounting frustration. Her usual boldness wavered under the embrace of connection. Then came the turning point. "Let's take this outside," I suggested abruptly, fueled by a surge of courage. The warm night air beckoned us towards the patio, where the stars hung like shimmering witnesses to our evolution. As we gathered beneath the canopy of twinkling lights, it felt like a homecoming. "Family ties are woven through stories, laughter, and resilience," I continued, allowing the peaceful night to cradle our shared histories. "Let's honor what binds us." Encouraged, family members began recounting tales I'd longed to hear, tales that bridged generations. Claire sat quietly, an involuntary spectator as the focus shifted entirely to building a tapestry of love around us. For the first time, I felt the final crack form in Claire's armor. The stories became the glue that held us together, and her attempts to regain attention seemed feeble amidst the unfolding warmth. I found serenity in this new reality. With every shared narrative, I felt my own dignity rise alongside the affection swirling around us, bolstered by laughter and memories that transcended prior tension. I recited my mantra in my heart, a fortification amid the powerful tide. "They can mute me at the table, never in my heart." As subtext and connection evolved in our family dynamics, I realized that this was the victory I had long sought, not just reclaiming a voice, but creating an inclusive space where love and stories could flourish. In essence, we had indeed woven something far greater than dominance. We had fostered genuine unity, and as the laughter danced in the night, it felt like a new beginning, one where we could all thrive together as a family.